Hi everyone, I'm Wendy, and today I'm showing you a Walmart grocery haul and the easiest meal prep ever. I've been planning on making this video for a while, and it worked out because about 2 weeks ago I had a little kitchen mishap, which I'll tell you about a little later. But needless to say, I need easy meal prep right now. So before we get into all of that, let me show you these groceries. Let's start with the produce. I love that Walmart has a great selection of organic produce because I like to get organic when I can, but I don't worry about it if I can't always find organic. So you'll see that I have some organic and some non-organic here. But I have a couple bags of organic sweet potatoes. I'm going to be baking those along with a couple of russet potatoes. I got one bag of those there. I wanted to get Yukon Gold potatoes, which normally they have at my Walmart, but they didn't have any today. So I just went with the russets. Then I have some organic oranges and apples for snacking. I got a bag of organic limes because they looked so beautiful, and lime juice is great to add to your dishes just to boost the flavor. I got some cherry tomatoes for salads, and then bananas, of course, I always have some of those. And then some other things for salads here. I have some little baby bell peppers, some little mini cucumbers, and some shredded carrots. These are great for easy prep because you don't even have to wash them and they're already shredded for you, so they're ready for salads. Then I also got some pre-shredded coleslaw also to add to salads, and then they had some already prepped cauliflower. So I'll use all of these veggies for snacking and making salads. Let's move on to the pantry items. Today I got a wild rice blend. I always like to have some kind of whole grain, so I'm going to show you how to batch prep that today. Then I also got some organic steel cut oats. Walmart also has rolled organic oats if you prefer that. Then I have some apple cider vinegar, some hemp hearts, which I'm going to be using to make a salad dressing. And then I've got some canned beans here. I went with some garbanzo beans, lentils, and black beans. Now these beans are not low sodium, but the organic ones at Walmart actually have a significantly lower amount of sodium than just their conventional beans. So these right here you can see have 120 milligrams of sodium. The other black beans at Walmart that are not organic have over 400 milligrams of sodium. So that's why I went with this option. Different Walmarts may carry different items, so at your local Walmart you might be able to find more varieties of no salt added or organic beans. And then I also got a can of no salt added Rotel. I think this is another item that might not be available at all Walmarts, but my Walmart does have the no salt added version. And speaking of no salt added, I also got no salt added tomato sauce. I got 2 cans of that, which I'm going to be using to make a barbecue sauce. Next, let's move on to the frozen items. I got a couple different varieties of just frozen vegetables. I have some sweet peas, some spinach, and then I got a couple bags of California blend. And I'll just use those throughout the week. I may not use all of these this week, but I like to stock up and keep frozen veggies on hand just so that I can throw together a quick meal as needed. And then I have frozen fruit to make smoothies and to put in my morning oatmeal. So I usually use the wild blueberries in my morning oatmeal, although I occasionally make a blueberry smoothie as well. But normally I use pineapple or mango for my smoothies, so that's what I have here. And then I also love dark sweet cherries. And then you might notice I didn't have any greens from Walmart. Now, normally I prefer not to go to 2 stores, so normally I would have gotten this from Walmart, but something must have happened to the case where all of their lettuces and greens were because everything was a slimy, nasty mess. So I ended up just swinging by Aldi on the way home, and I grabbed a spring mix here to make salads, and then I got a few containers of baby spinach and arugula, and I'll use those to make smoothies. Since I stopped in Aldi, I also grabbed a can of cannellini beans because I wanted to make my cheesy sauce today, and I always use either cannellini or Great Northern beans. But all of the white beans at Walmart had way more sodium than I like to consume. They were all over 400 milligrams, and as you can see, this one from Aldi has about half that amount. So that was my grocery haul. My total from Walmart was $114.43, and at Aldi I spent $15.23. So that's right around $130 for all of these groceries. So now it's time for food prep. I like to start by getting organized. I set all my fruit out so it's ready for easy snacking. I put my greens in the fridge because there's no prep with those, they're already pre-washed. And for now, I put all of the other produce in the fridge as well. The produce that needs to be washed, I'll deal with later. Then I put away my canned beans, adding them to my collection because I won't need them for my meal prep today. Part of this easy meal prep is to have canned beans on hand so you can always easily add beans to any meal. Then I left out the groceries that I'll be using for my meal prep today, and I also grabbed some extra ingredients from the pantry. I didn't buy all of my spices and condiments today because I already had them on hand, but most everything that I'm using today can be found at Walmart. Having all of your ingredients out will make your food prep go so much more smoothly. And another tip for the fastest food prep is to start with the things that cook the longest. So for me, that would be my sweet potatoes and russet potatoes, which I'm baking. So I'll start by preheating the oven to 400 degrees and I'll wash all of my potatoes. And because of my injured thumb, you can see I'm wearing a food prep glove on that hand, just to keep my bandage dry. So while I'm washing the potatoes, let me tell you about what happened. For those of you who are squeamish, I won't show any pictures or anything, but a couple of weeks ago, I was in a rush and I was chopping vegetables and I accidentally chopped off just the very tip of my thumb. It was not my finest moment, but it's a good lesson to all of us to slow down in the kitchen. I'm no chef by any means, but I'm pretty skilled with a knife and I've been chopping vegetables for a long time. So even someone like me who has been cooking for most of my life can have mistakes in the kitchen like this. And these things especially tend to happen when you're in a rush like I was. So this is also a reminder to use good knife skills. So while I'm talking about it, I may as well give you some safety tips for chopping. Definitely make sure you take your time. You always want to curl your fingers under so that your knuckles hit the back of your knife rather than your fingertips. And it's important to have a really sharp knife. A dull knife is actually much more dangerous than a sharp one. So it's going to take a while to heal, and in the meantime, I'm doing really easy food prep like this. So now that I got that story out of the way, and my potatoes are washed, I'll get them into the oven. For the sweet potatoes, I like to just chop the ends off, and then I pat them dry and lay them out on a baking sheet. For the russet potatoes, I just pat them dry, and I poke them a few times with a fork. Some people say you need to do this to prevent your potatoes from exploding in the oven, but some people say that that is a myth. I've heard of people who have had potatoes explode, so I like to just give them a couple pokes. It doesn't take much time anyway. I've also heard that the texture turns out a little better, so they end up being a little fluffier if you poke them. And then I'll put those in my 400-degree oven. I usually bake them for about 40 minutes to an hour, depending on the type of potato, and I like to flip them halfway through. Then, while the potatoes are cooking, I'll get my oatmeal going. I've showed how I batch prep my oatmeal in many videos, so I'll put a link below with the recipe. Normally, I use regular steel-cut oats, but the ones that I got at Walmart today are quick-cooking steel-cut oats. So I'm going to be cooking these a little bit different, and I'm not sure exactly how they'll turn out, but we'll see in the end of the video. So I'm adding 2 cups of these quick-cook steel-cut oats and 5 cups of water. I also added 5 chopped medjool dates. You can add these before or after cooking. I do it both ways. If you put them in now, they break down while they're cooking and give a subtle sweetness to the whole batch. If you wait until after cooking, then you'll have little chunks of dates, so you have bursts of sweetness throughout the oatmeal. And with my regular steel-cut oats, I usually do this for 6 or 7 minutes at high pressure, but since these are quick cooking, I'm gonna try just 1 minute. While that's cooking, I'll wash some of my produce. For the tomatoes, I add them to a bowl with some water, swish them around a little bit, and then rinse them off. I do the same thing with my bell peppers, and the same with the cucumbers. I just use water for all of this. If you wanted to, you could add some vinegar to this, but I find that water does just fine. And then I'll pat those dry and put them in some containers to put in the fridge. Moisture will make your produce spoil faster, so you do want to make sure they're very dry before you put them in the fridge. And then I also have the rest of my produce, which is already pre-washed, so I have my carrots, cauliflower, and cabbage there in the bottom drawer in the fridge. Another batch cooking tip is to clean as you go. So whenever you have a little downtime, use it to wash dishes or clean up your workspace. So that's what I did next, and then it was about time to check on the potatoes, so I flipped those and put them back in for a little longer. By this point, the Instant Pot was done, so I checked on my oatmeal. Like I said, I wasn't sure how it would turn out because I usually use regular steel-cut oats, and these were quick cook, but it looks like it turned out pretty well. I'm happy with that. So I think 1 minute was just right. Now I'm adding a generous scoop of pumpkin pie spice, and then this is optional, but I love adding pumpkin to my oatmeal. It boosts the nutrition and it makes it really nice and creamy. So I'll transfer that to a storage container and let it cool before I put it in the fridge. Then I need to clean my Instant Pot liner because I'll be using it again for my wild rice. So I washed and dried that. I rinsed 2 cups of the wild rice blend and I'm adding that to my Instant Pot. I'm adding 2.5 cups of water and I'll cook that at high pressure for 22 minutes. Next up, I'll make some sauces. Today I'm starting with my barbecue sauce. I've shared this recipe on the channel before. I can link to that video. But today I'm doing it a little bit differently. When I first showed you this barbecue sauce, the idea behind it was to be a really fast and easy sauce that you didn't need any special equipment. It literally comes together in less than 2 minutes. You just stir everything up and it's done. But today I'm taking an extra step and cooking it on the stovetop. So I'm adding everything to a pot, and then I'll heat it up to a simmer and cook it for about 5 to 10 minutes. Anytime you cook something like this, it'll just help to develop the flavors and make it all the more delicious. You'll want to keep an eye on that, and once it starts bubbling, put the lid on so it doesn't splatter over your stovetop. While that heats up, I'll work on my second sauce. This is sort of a ranch-style salad dressing or dip. It's been so long since I've had actual ranch dressing, so I'm not even sure exactly what ranch tastes like anymore, but I'm just adding the flavors that I remember. This recipe will also be linked below the video. I'm using my Vitamix. A high-powered blender would be best to make sure you get the creamiest texture. I'm adding 1/2 cup of hemp seeds, 1/2 cup of apple cider vinegar, 3/4 cup of water, 3 tablespoons of mustard, 1/4 cup of date sugar, and then 3 teaspoons each of granulated garlic and onion. If you don't have a high-powered blender, you might want to let this sit for a bit. That way the hemp seeds can soak up a little liquid and soften so that they'll blend better. And I blended this before I added any herbs because I didn't want it to turn into a muddy green color, so this way it keeps a little bit of that white color. So here I have 3 teaspoons each of parsley and chives and 1.5 tablespoons of dill. I'm just using dried herbs. If you wanted to, you could use fresh. Of course, the fresh and dried herbs will have a little bit different flavor. And I don't want to blend this too much, I just want to mix these in. So I'm just going to pulse the Vitamix a couple times. Then I'll transfer this to a jar and store it in the fridge. Another pro tip, always make sure you rinse out your Vitamix right away. Especially when you blend something creamy like this, it's best to rinse it out so it doesn't get all dried and crusty, which would make it a lot more difficult to clean. Then once my barbecue sauce is done, I'll also pour that into a jar and I'll let that one cool before I put it in the fridge. I checked my potatoes again and they were done, which is perfect because I need to use one of the sweet potatoes for my last sauce. I've shared this recipe multiple times on the channel before and I always change it up a little bit, but today I'm doing my classic cheesy sauce recipe. So that includes 1 can of white beans. Like I said earlier, normally I use Great Northern beans, but today I'm using cannellini. And since these weren't no salt added beans, I made sure to rinse them really well. Then I have 1 cup of that cooked sweet potato, 1/2 cup of nutritional yeast, and then my spices. 1 teaspoon each of garlic and onion powder, 1/2 teaspoon of smoked paprika, 1/4 teaspoon of ground turmeric, and a little bit of black pepper. I'm also adding a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar and about a tablespoon of stone ground mustard. Sometimes I add a handful of cashews for a little extra richness, but today I'm leaving it out. Then I always start with a cup of water. Depending on your potatoes that day, you might need more or less. Today, 1 cup ended up being perfect for me. Then I'm transferring that to a storage container, and you can stop right here, and this cheesy sauce is really versatile. But today, I'm turning this into Rotel Dip, and I'm using that no salt added Rotel that I got at Walmart today. You'll simply stir that in. I recommend warming this up before you serve it. And at this point, my food prep is just about done. All that's left is the wild rice blend, which needs to finish cooking and depressurizing. So while I wait for that, I'll wash the rest of my dishes, I'll fluff it a little bit with a fork and transfer it to containers. So that's my food prep. This food prep took me less than 2 hours, and that includes finishing all the dishes. If I hadn't been recording, I probably could have even gotten it done in an hour and a half or less. So now let me show you a few ideas for how you can use these items to make meals throughout the week. For me, breakfast is easy. I always have oatmeal and a smoothie. As you saw in the grocery haul, I always buy greens and frozen fruit. So I make a green smoothie with that, and then I use my batch prepped oatmeal along with some blueberries or other fruit, and I'm all set. If you prefer a savory breakfast, you might check out my Aldi grocery haul in meal prep. In that video, I made a savory vegan breakfast. And then for lunch and dinner, you have so many options. One of my go-to meals is a salad, but not just any salad. I like to bulk mine up with tons of veggies and starches. So for this one, I'm starting with a bed of lettuce, and I'm adding some of that wild rice blend and some black beans. Then I loaded it up with all the vegetables I bought this week, and I used that ranch-style dressing and had a baked sweet potato along with it. Here's another day with another big salad, but instead of the sweet potato, I had a russet potato topped with some lentils covered in my barbecue sauce. Here I have a taco bowl. I started by chopping up another russet potato and topping it with that Rotel Dip. Then I have some more of that wild rice blend and black beans, along with tomatoes, peppers, and lettuce. On this day, I mixed more lentils with some of that barbecue sauce and topped one of my sweet potatoes. And with barbecue lentils, I love to have a good coleslaw. For this one, I simply mixed my shredded cabbage with my ranch-style dressing, and once again had some of the wild rice blend. You can even make soups and stews out of your batch prepped items. Here I opened up a can of chickpeas, and I combined that with some of my shredded carrots, the russet potatoes, and wild rice. I added some onion and garlic and a little bit of frozen spinach, and then I flavored it up with the barbecue sauce. Finally, I have another easy meal where I just made French fries out of the russet potatoes, and I dipped those in both the barbecue sauce and the Rotel Dip, and I had that along with some of the wild rice mixed with more Rotel Dip. The possibilities really are endless, so use your creativity to make any meal you can imagine. Of course, you can go super simple, take some of your frozen veggies, a potato, and top it with the vegan Rotel. Even the more complicated ideas that I showed you here were put together in 10 minutes or less. That's why I love batch prepping this way, because the batch prep itself is so quick, and then you can make a wide variety of different meals throughout the week. And if you need extra snacks throughout the day, that's where that fresh fruit comes in. Let me know in the comments what you thought of this meal prep. I hope I gave you some ideas, and feel free to share your own ideas for how you would combine these components into meals. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you next time. Don't forget that my t-shirts are for sale now, but they'll only be available for a limited time, so head to the link below the video to grab yours today. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you next time.